In life, there are a great many mysteries. Things that experience and education and all kinds of other passings of time will allow us to uncover or learn. And I would propose to you this morning that one of the great mysteries is the mystery of sin. It sounds much more dramatic if I were to say it in Latin. The great theologians of the church call this the mysterium iniquitatis, the mystery of sin, the unknown of iniquity. I think it is true and accurate that as we wrestle with sin, in trying to avoid it and try to grow in holiness, there is a component to the struggle that is deeply mysterious. St. Paul, in his letter to the Romans, cries out, Why do I do those things that I don't want to do? Why am I stuck in this experience of sin, he says. And then in another place, Paul must have been a really successful sinner, because in another letter, he says, I have a thorn in my flesh, an angel of Satan to beat me. And I beg Jesus to take this thorn from my flesh. And the punchline is Jesus said no. There's a mystery even in the depths of our struggle with sin. And it's this mystery which Lent highlights as one of the priorities that we're supposed to address. Part of Lent is doing penance prayer specifically to try to wrestle with our sin problem. Everyone's got it. I do too. But if we're going to grow in this, there's a moment of self-discovery required. Think about the youngest son in this parable. This parable is not only pretty much the only parable that Jesus tells that's so explicitly about sin and the consequences of sin and the power of God's mercy, but also, interestingly enough, this parable, which is normally called the prodigal son, is the longest parable in all the Gospels. This is the longest parable that Jesus uses. There's something in that example of the youngest son that seems to be mysterious even to himself. As a young man, and back in the day, we're thinking about somebody who's in his mid-teenage years, says to his father, give me my inheritance now. Father, I wish you were dead because I want money now. That's what the message is. It's a profound insult against the father, against the family, and then when he gets what his father gives to him, his response is irrational and reckless. He goes to a distant land where he knows no one, and he goes through his inheritance, which by the sound of the parable must have been significant, and he spends it all completely recklessly. In a few weeks, a few months, maybe as much as a year or two, it's all gone. There's almost this compulsion, this tension that he just has to act recklessly. And we see when he gets to the lowest point in his life, he realizes something profound. The parable doesn't say what, but his empty stomach and his destitute body, about to die of starvation, allows him to finally come to his senses. And here we see what I would propose to you is the great exploration of this mystery. The need to come to our senses. Normally when we hear a preacher talking about coming to sense about our sin and coming to understanding about these things, the messages are often burdened with messages of guilt and shame and recrimination, and I think that's completely wrong. No Catholic guilt. I'm Irish. I've got enough of that. I think the mysterium iniquitatis, the mystery of sin, is the same as the mystery of the human heart's desire for God. I think what ultimately motivates us to those sins, and we all have our favorite 2, maybe 3 sins that we all wrestle with. Everybody's got them. Like I said, I got my own. I've told you freely before, gluttony is one of my favorites, and it's just part of the human experience that we've all got a sin, 2 or 3, that we just keep wrestling with. Think about the sins that are so common that we see here in our midst. Maybe the sin of gossip. How easy it is to tear others down so that we ourselves, and here's that mystery, we do it not because we dislike others, we do it not because we want to hurt others, but we do it because somewhere deep down inside there's this deep need to feel important, to feel special, to feel significant. And so there's this weird reverse logic that when we tear others down, we have a momentary experience of feeling enlightened or important or special. Think about the sin of gluttony, particularly when we're talking about alcohol or other chemicals, drugs. Could it be, and I say this rhetorically because of course I hear confessions for a living, right? You know this, like people tell me these things. Could it be that people are just deeply burdened and they're looking for some moment of escape, some moment of peace? Could it be that those whose lives are broken and hurting, filled with anxiety or worry or all other internal torments, silence those voices for just a moment with some intoxicant so as to know a brief sense of peace, euphoria, or calm? There's a mystery here where people are ultimately looking for something good that motivates them towards something sinful. Or maybe one of the sins that is easy to spot, maybe in our own lives, or certainly maybe in the lives of a lot of people we see on campus, and that is the struggle with sexual sin. How often are people so burdened by loneliness that there's this deep desire for connection with another, or the deep desire to know the joy of another's embrace, the intimate moment with another person? How much is that struggle with hooking up or fornication, call it what you want, how often is that motivated by a deep desire for something authentically holy, and that is real union and intimacy with another person? I think, without saying it, this is exactly what that young man in this parable came to realize. He who spent all of his money on all of these wild and crazy things is not much different than a typical college student on a campus like ours. And yet, the real mystery here that he came to his senses to understand was that at the very depth of what was going on, he was searching for something good. And overcome with shame and guilt and sorrow, he finally came to his senses and he returned home. And the profound mercy of his father was that when he was overcome with shame, he said, I've sinned against you, Father, I've sinned against heaven, therefore my identity, this is what he's thinking, my identity has been broken. I am too ashamed by what I have done. I no longer deserve my identity. Who I truly am has been, this is the son's thought, has been irrevocably broken. I'm no longer your son. And the Father will hear none of it. He won't even respond. He doesn't even take up the argument. He doesn't even disagree with his son. He turns to the servants and says, go get all of the things that he needs. The finest robe, a gold ring, and sandals on his feet. Get the banquet ready. Because my son, his son just said, I'm not worthy. And the father says, oh, you are. My son is back. There's this profound reality of God's response to our struggle with sin. That as we burden ourselves with all of the weight and all of the filth that comes with our struggle with sin, even though if we come to our senses we realize what I was really looking for underneath all of it was something good, something noble, the Father's response, Jesus' response is, I know. I know what you've been looking for. I know you. I understand the drama. I understand the pain. I understand what you really have been wrestling with. And it's because of that that I will shower you with mercy. Notice the eldest son. Maybe the eldest son hadn't done enough sinning in his life, because his heart had been hardened. He, in his own eyes, had done everything right. And just as the son wanted to break relationship with his father in acknowledgement of his sin, right? His son says, I'm no longer worthy to be your son. The eldest brother picks up the same thing. That son of yours, he says. The eldest brother won't even acknowledge that his younger brother is still part of the family. The eldest brother has rejected him. His brother has even rejected his father and won't call his father Father. He has broken those relationships because of his own hardened heart. He hasn't experienced that at the depth of sin, everyone is ultimately striving for something good. There is a mystery here. I've never met anybody who struggled with sin because they love evil. It doesn't happen. The eldest brother didn't realize that. And so his heart had become hardened. And he was unable to enter the feast. He was unable to allow his own father to guide him. He was unable to even embrace the blessings of his father. His father says, everything I have is already yours. You've got all of the blessings that I long to give to you. They're yours. Why haven't you accepted them? Why can't you love as I love? It's because the older brother's heart was hardened and he couldn't see the wayward ways of his younger brother, the mystery that for whatever reason he was looking for something good and finding sin instead. The beginning of the gospel says that sinners were approaching Jesus to listen to him. Jesus created a community around himself where people must have automatically understood this. People must have automatically experienced the compassion and the empathy of Christ. That they knew that when they approached Jesus, they would not experience guilt, shame, recrimination, judgmentalism, or that criticism of the Pharisees. They knew they were safe in Jesus' company. They knew they would encounter mercy. And I think the reason is because Jesus understood that what deeply motivates everyone in our struggle with sin is ultimately we're looking for something good, true, and beautiful. And any effort at looking for what's good, true, and beautiful, even if there's confusion and it leads us to sin, the desire to find what is good, true, and beautiful is a desire for God. And so it would make sense that sinners would be drawing so close to Christ. We, in our struggle with sin, should do the same.